Hello again, and I just kind of want to finish up this little set of playlists with kind of a real connection to some of the stuff that you guys might be used to seeing in mathematics. So, we're gonna use this example of calculating circumference, but really this could be applied to any formula that you're used to seeing. So right now we have the circumference is equal to 2 times pi times the radius, and we have a nice little diagram here. Sometimes you might see a diagram with a diameter. Anyways, there's ways that we can deal with that too. But for starters, we're just going to deal with a simple equation where we require one variable to compute the value of the dimension that we're looking for, and that's the circumference. Okay. So to review some of what we covered last time, we looked at how we can write some input statements to collect information from a user, and then we can create some meaningful output using that information. So in some cases we were outputting a name, right? I can just run this as a reminder. So we had Mr. Hill, and we had our values for W. In this case, they were all integers, okay? W, X, Y, and Z. And then this proved here that our input was correct. We're reading and storing our input correctly. And then, we're producing some meaningful output here. Okay, so, generally for this circle example, we're not going to need all of these statements. So I'm going to do some modifying. And, for fun, we can kind of keep your name in there, okay? And then you can kind of use that to kind of personalize your practice, okay? So we'll keep that statement in there, but it's not really necessary for this particular example. In the comments here, I'm just going to put a little description of what we're doing. Calculate the circumference. Okay? Given the area, given the radius. Okay? So, for starters, one of the things that we can do, and I'm just going to make a few spaces in here to create a little bit of room so you can see where I'm at. But, in our equation right here, we have two variables. One of them is the radius, and one of them is the value, will be the result of, our computation here, which is our circumference. Okay, but the information that we need to be able to compute circumference is our radius. Okay, so this is the statement that we're going to have to require. So we're gonna throw in a radius right here, and to be precise, we can stick to r. We could also call it radius. Now, because I'm only collecting one variable, I can delete these statements. Okay. Now, this is something you can practice too. If you're working through these videos, a great way to kind of learn from these videos is to follow along by typing and interacting. You can stop and start this video and practice as you go along. Okay, so right now we're entering a name. Actually, you know what? Let's get rid of that because we don't really need it. Okay, so we're entering a value for r. Okay, now I'm going to put the word radius in there because this is the statement that the user is going to read. Okay, now to calculate our circumference, I'm going to stretch this out a little bit so that we can get everything on one line. I'm going to clear my output so it doesn't get confusing. Okay, and one way to kind of shortcut, without removing everything, or erasing everything, one of the things I can do is highlight a large section of code and hit Control and slash. And what that does is it'll comment out a whole block. So right now the compiler is not going to run this. It's only going to run this one statement here that's not in comments. So I can run this, and we can see right off the bat, please enter. Okay, let me see. Let's run this again just so that you can see. Please enter a value for the radius, and right now I'm going to enter 4, and that's the end of our program. So now we have some good input. One of the things we talked about before is being able to see the values, see our input. Okay, so we use the print statement. Now, to make meaningful output here, I want to see what the value of R that's being read and stored. So I'm going to put R in brackets just like we did in the last video so that we can see the radius here. The radius equals, okay, and then I can put R here, okay, and let's run this. So let's enter a value for the radius, 9, and right now the radius is equal to 9. So great, right? Our program is asking for input, and it's reading and storing it correctly. Okay. Now, one of the last things I want to do is being able is to be able to compute my my circumference. So I can write an equation, right? I can use C, right? Or I can actually write the word circumference. And for me, I'm going to write the word circumference because it makes my program a little more readable. Okay. So the circumference, right, if we grab our equation here, the circumference is equal to, 2 pi r. Now what this means is when two things are sandwiched together like that with nothing in between, the statement that's understood is multiplication. Okay, so 2 times pi times r. So here we can go 2 times, in this case, I'm going to use, I'll show you this in a second, but math.py, okay, it's a library in Python that we can use, times r, which is our radius, okay. And right off the bat, I think I'm going to change this to radius, okay, so that it makes a little more sense. So our circumference is equal to 2 times math.py times the radius. Now to be able to use this math.py library, I'm going to have to use my little import math at the top. So import math at the top. Okay? And what that does is allows us to use the math library in Python. Okay? And the last thing I want to do is I want to be able to see that I'm actually computing. I see what my circumference is. Right now, I'll compute it, but I won't actually see it. So I want to print it to the screen. Okay? And I'm going to print circumference. Okay? Circumference. Circumference. Okay? And let's run this puppy and see what we get. Okay, enter a value for the radius, 7. And I get an error because R is not defined. Now, we changed it. So remember, we called it the radius instead. So R wasn't defined because we didn't actually give it a value, right? Once we changed the name, it stopped to recognize this. So we got to be consistent in our naming convention. That's an error and error message, and I'm gonna do a separate video on error messages. And as you start to program, you're gonna realize, these are very helpful in helping us find our mistakes. So let's run this. Run the radius, so 4, and if our radius are 4, our circumference is this value right here. But like I said, this isn't very meaningful. So what we can do is we can add a little string to this output statement, and I can say circumference equals, and remember that in between my string and my value, right, I need a comma. Okay, and now we can run this, and for a radius of 6, my circumference is equal to this, and I spelt this wrong, so I'm going to head in here and ference, okay, circumference, and that should work. So 5, and it gives them my value here, and we can check to see if that's mathematically correct. So when my radius is 5, right? This is 5 times pi times 2. Okay, and you end up with 31.4159, and you can see that that number is the same. Okay, so it's working. And you can use this kind of process with any equation, right? Ask the user for some input based on the values that we need in our equation. So we have our knowns and our unknowns, so we need our unknown values to be inputted by the user, right? And a nice little statement to compute that. We can have a calculation in here, right? This is normally given to us on a formula sheet. It might be in the question. Lots of ways that we can grab these formulas that we need and then converting them to Python statements. Sometimes it's straight up, where you can just use simple pluses and minuses, but if you have multiplication or division in your equation, you're going to have to use the proper mathematical operator to make that adjustment. Now, I didn't talk too much about the math library in Python, but for a special symbol like that, we can grab the value of pi. Another way that you could have done this, right, is simply write 3.14 right into your equation, and that would also give us a correct answer. Okay, so we can test that 5, and we end up with 31.4 and a whole bunch of zeros. And we can talk a little bit about how we can round these things in a different video. But that's a good start, and what I encourage you to do is practice this with some of your homework, some of the familiar equations that you know. You can do it with area of a circle. You can do it with volume. You can do it with perimeter. Lots of different familiar equations out there that you can practice writing programs for that take a little bit of input from the user and then perform a simple calculation, and that you can print it to the screen. Okay, this is like your little calculator. All right, I hope that helps, and have a great afternoon, great weekend. If it's your weekend, and in the next playlist we'll get a little more involved with some different ways that you can use Python and mathematics.